All right.
Hello? Hello? All right, we're going to get this guest speaker slot started for tonight. I just wanted to thank everyone again for coming out. It's a great crowd. If you guys don't know me, my name's Oscar. I serve on the board of the Plymouth Area Democrats. I help them out with their technology and communications. I am also proudly working with Jon Kiper here, helping manage his campaign, and so I'm proud to have him up in Plymouth. I'm proud to be standing next to the next governor of New Hampshire. Jon, I'll let you do your introduction and talk about all the wonderful things you're going to do for New Hampshire, but I just want to give a brief summary. Jon is a small business owner, he is a father, he was a former Newmarket Town Councilor, and he ran for governor in 2024. Jon's campaign proved that we can get big money out of politics and do good work. Jon's campaign spent just under $60,000. That is approximately $4 per vote. The competitor spent nearly $30 per vote. We have proven, New Hampshire, that we can make effective change with limited funds, and we're here to do it again. Please, everyone, give a warm welcome to Jon Kiper.
Thank you, Oscar. Thank you so much for having me here. I appreciate everybody coming out. Again, if you don't remember me from last time, my name is Jon Kiper. I have been running a business in Newmarket down by the seacoast for the last 10 years. I have a 9-year-old son in the public school system, and that really matters to me. So, what are we going to do to win in 2026? Everyone is asking themselves, I'm sure. It's frankly kind of simple when it comes down to it. We've got to win the Democrats, of course, but we also have to win the independent voters. And who are the independent voters? Well, I can tell you, we've done the research. They're generally younger people, and they're generally working class folks. And I was an independent voter for many, many years until Trump came along, and I decided, hey, I'm probably not voting for a Republican anytime soon. So I've been a Democrat for as long as he's been around, and I've only voted for Democrats anyway. But I know how the independent voters think. And so how are we going to win them? Our idea is to have simple messaging and simple messengers who can connect to people on a very basic level. So for my whole life, we've lived under this system of trickle-down economics, where we cut taxes for the rich. Sorry, the Republicans cut taxes for the rich and for the corporations, and the money's supposed to just come trickling down to the rest of us. Now, we know that's not true. That has never happened, and it was never going to happen. So we need an antidote to trickle-down economics. So what we're proposing is what we're calling community-first economics. And this is where, you guessed it, we put the community first. So the idea is simple, is that we invest in the single mom who's struggling to pay rent while working 2 jobs. We invest in the elderly folks who are getting priced out of the trailer park because of property taxes. We invest in the young man who's stuck in his parents' basement and wonders if he'll ever get a good job and be able to move out and have a family of his own. So for us, this looks like community-first economics is lowering property taxes. How do we do that? By funding education in a way that is fair and aligns with the Constitution, and this will bring us affordable housing. Because all 3 of these issues are tied up together. Housing, property taxes, education funding. It's all one issue that needs, frankly, one solution, and that is a new way of funding our schools. So, how are we going to do that? Well, I would tell you, and I think you will agree, that the poor people of New Hampshire do not have more money for taxes. And in fact, if you didn't know this, the poor people in New Hampshire, the lower 20%, pay a much higher rate of their income than the rich do. And so the rich in this state are frankly living here, and they're in basically a tax haven. And we need to realize that, and we need to tell the lower 20% to get on board with our messaging, because we are going to help them live better lives. And how are we going to do it? Again, lowering housing costs, funding education, and lowering their property taxes. These three things are very important because they are bipartisan. So I owned a restaurant for 10 years, and in that time I would talk to all sorts of people. I would talk to Democrats, Republicans, libertarians, anarchists, and I can tell you this, that everyone is struggling with housing right now. Well, sorry, not everyone. The middle class, the working class are struggling with housing right now. There are a lot of rich people that are doing just fine. And people are struggling with property taxes. You know, I would hear it all the time, that Republicans, libertarians would tell me, my property taxes are so high, I'm willing to talk about a new form of revenue. And again, the education system, we have known this for 30 years, since Claremont, 1991. And we went down to one of their school board meetings, and it was kind of heartbreaking, frankly, because these people have fought and fought and fought for the educational funding that they frankly deserve, that the Constitution guarantees them, and they still are suffering, you know? And they're hanging in there, but you can tell it's getting to be too much, you know? And the state needs to fulfill its constitutional obligation to fund public schools. That's the bottom line. It's in the Constitution, and we have to remind Republicans of that every time that we can. It's Part 2, Section 83 of the Constitution that tells that the state is supposed to fund public education, not the towns, not the cities. And we must remind the Republicans, they took an oath to the Constitution, just as everyone in this room that's serving in public office, as did I. And we need to uphold our constitutional requirements to these children, you know, because it's the kids that are suffering, and they deserve economic justice, and they deserve educational justice. And as governor, I'm going to bring that to Claremont and to every community in New Hampshire. So how are we going to do that, right? And I'll tell you, it's a pretty simple phrase that's been going around. We're going to tax the rich. Okay, that's how we're going to do it. And the fact of the matter is, the state of New Hampshire had many good taxes on wealth, such as the interest and dividends tax. We used to have an inheritance tax. Our business taxes used to be higher. And all of those things have been slowly wiped out by the Republicans over the last 20 or so years. And if we could just get back to where we were in the year 2000, we would at least be not drowning. We would be treading water, okay? Add a couple more things, such as taxes on second homes for people that live out of state. Legalizing cannabis would bring in some money. And we can start bringing in the revenue that we need to run a proper state. And that's what's really important for people to understand. We do not have enough money to run a state in a way that's safe, in a way that's productive, and frankly, New Hampshire is one of the richest states in the country. We don't need to live like this. We don't. And people are moving here, wealthy people from around the country, because they know that they can move here and not have to pay taxes. And those are not the kind of people that we want coming, who are just trying to basically undermine our local community. So, just to review, our whole plan is community first economics, housing, property taxes, education. And I'm going to say that again, housing, property taxes, education, housing, property taxes, education, 3 times. Because 3 times is how many times it takes you to remember a message. This is a marketing trick that I learned a long time ago at my restaurant. Somebody might see a Facebook ad, and then they might see another, a menu somewhere on someone's counter or something, and then, they'll hear it word of mouth. But they need to hear the message 3 times. When you're going out knocking doors, making phone calls, and all that stuff, just remember, the message's got to hit 3 times. And that's why we're trying to keep it simple. Community first economics, housing, property taxes, education. And I think with these bipartisan issues, we can win Republicans over, we can win independents over, and of course we're going to win Democrats. And when we do that, we can win the corner office, we can keep Kelly out to 1 term, and we can win all the way down the ballot. So that's basically my spiel. I like to keep it short and sweet because I want you to remember the 4 things I just said. Community first economics, housing, education, property taxes. That way when you leave here and people are like, what's that Kiper guy all about? You can say, what was he about? Housing, education, property taxes, community first economics. The opposite of trickle-down economics is where we invest in our local community, and then the corporations have got educated people who can work for them. They have got people who are able to spend money because they're not spending 60% of their income on rent or mortgage. That's a lesson that I learned as a small business owner. I had a guy who used to come into my restaurant, and he didn't come in that often. And around Christmas, he started coming in a lot. And he said, yeah, I can come in around Christmas because I work at Best Buy. And they only give me 20 hours most of the year because they don't want to pay any sort of benefits. But when Christmas comes around, they give me all the hours I want because they need to sell more, electronic equipment. And he said, so I can come in here, twice a week during Christmas, during December. I can't come in twice a week the rest of the year. This is how I learned about economics, was seeing my neighbors and the money that they had and how they spent it. I had a barber shop across the street. When those guys do have a good week, they come into my restaurant more often. That's just a bottom line. And when you have someone like Jeff Bezos just hoarding all this money in these bank accounts, buying yachts and all this stuff, that's not helping the community. That's not helping anyone. That's not good for the economy. It's not even good for Amazon. Because if he was paying his employees more, they'd have more money to buy things from Amazon. So we are in a system that is fundamentally broken, and people need to hear a new message. It's not enough to just say Trump bad, Kelly out bad. We need a new way to run our communities and to run our state and to frankly run this country so that we can get back on track. Because the biggest problem in this state and in this country is inequality. And the trickle-down economics that began under Ronald Reagan just made that inequality blast off. And right now, and you can look, this is historical. Any country that has dealt with inequality at this level, it's not good. At a certain point, it becomes unsustainable, and we are reaching that point. Donald Trump is not the cause of our problems. He is a symptom of inequality gone out of control. And he offered the people a solution. Obviously, it was snake oil. It was BS. But the fact is, people are hungry for something new. We're not going back to the status quo. That's not going to happen. We need to offer the people a new vision of the future in which everyone is succeeding. In which the children, we treat our children like an investment in the future, as opposed to some budget item that we're squabbling over whether or not they're going to have enough teachers or have enough paper or have enough pencils at the school. I mean, we've really got to reframe the way that we think about all of these expenses as not just budget items, but really people's future and the future of our state and the future of this country. So I'm Jon Kiper. I'm running for governor. I would love to take some questions for y'all because there are many issues, of course, that I have not talked about. I'll just start right over here. Yeah.
Thank you, Becky Noel. I teach history at Plymouth State. I would love to see a whole youth agenda. You're right, we get a lot of retirees, including a lot of people in this room who are lovely people, but we export our young people. And a lot of that is because of the community economic gap that you're talking about. So I would love to see childcare, better funding of K-12 education, and some funding of the higher education system, because I think that is an absolute hemorrhage. I'm being laid off because of that after 21 years.
Sorry.
Yeah. So I first of all want to hear what you're going to do about those things.
Yep.
And I'd like to start with higher ed funding, because that's, in flames. But I also want to know what you'll say to people who are benefiting from the education freedom accounts.
Yeah, so, there's a lot of problems in this state. Education is obviously, higher ed is one of them. The trick is we cannot campaign on everything. And so that's why we're focusing on these three issues. And that's not to say we're not gonna, when we're governing, do many, many things. And the problem with higher ed is basically fairly simple. Well, there's a couple problems, but we need more funding. There's really nothing, there's no way around it. But we have to look at funding of higher ed and education in general as an investment that corporations should want to have happen, because you cannot expect companies to move here if there's no educated people to work for them. And I think that's the argument that the Republicans and the business leaders need to hear, is that this is an investment in your company, which is why you should pay more taxes in our state. In terms of childcare, we definitely need, the way I look at childcare is like infrastructure, right? We wouldn't let our roads go untended. We wouldn't let our water pipes rot out. Why are we letting childcare facilities just close? But ideally, in an ideal world, this isn't gonna happen anytime soon, I would like our housing costs to get to the point where more people didn't need childcare so that they could stay home with their kids. I was lucky enough that I owned my restaurant, and me and my son's mother were able to not send him to childcare. It saved us a ton of money. We couldn't have afforded it anyway, but we just worked our schedule out so one of us was with him all the time. Or he's with my grandparents or whatever. or my parents, his grandparents. But it's really important that we realize how detrimental it is to our kids when they're going into childcare at like 2 weeks, which is a reality for people. You know, there's a lot of low-income people that don't have a choice. And so I would like to make the longer-term goal to be where one parent could stay home. You know, I think, and that should be our goal. Childcare, we need to make it affordable, but the bigger effort in the next 10 years should be mom or dad. One of them should be able to stay home for at least 6 months or longer. You know, I think you look at the kids now, like, oh, the kids are anxious and they're nervous and they've got all these problems. They were raised in childcare. They weren't raised by their parents, and then people wonder what's wrong. And it's like taking a baby from their parents at 2 weeks or 3 weeks is just crazy to me. I mean, my girlfriend we're in the process of trying to have another kid, and she said, the other day she said, do you know I only get 6 weeks of paid vacation? She's got a pretty good job. And I said, honey, do you know that you're probably on the higher end of how much childcare or how much time at home you're gonna get with our baby? Like, most people are getting, if barely that, and it's terrible. I think people need to look at the bigger ramifications for a whole society with that aspect. And just, babies should be with their mothers and their parents. Or husbands, yeah. I mean, like, I was a stay-at-home dad, you know, for part of the time too. To me, it doesn't, you know, but being with your parents, I think, is crucial. The first, especially 6 weeks, 6 months, that sort of time frame. Oh, yes, sorry.
Okay, my name is Gisela Estes, and I am retired from teaching German at Plymouth State. And I have 2 issues. Number one, you already touched upon it. I don't believe that any public money should go to any private schools. If parents want to send their kids to private schools, I should pay for it. And number 2, how scary are the free staters?
So to your first one, I 100% agree. We need to do away with the education freedom vouchers. Those are created by people that want to destroy the public school system, not help it. And we need to make sure that average voters who have their kids in public school understand that. And not only that, but if you read the Constitution of New Hampshire, it specifically forbids state money from going to religious education, particularly. And while they figured out a workaround, I do not think the guy who wrote the New Hampshire Constitution meant that you would give the state money to some independent organization that would then give it to the parents to send to the private school. You know, that obviously flies in the face of the Constitution. And I think it's really important that we use the Constitution, because the Republicans claim to be the part of the Constitution, and frankly, they're not. And many of our problems, if not all of our problems, would be solved if we simply enforced the Constitution as it was written. And as for...
Can I speak to that?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, I used to be a teacher, so I can yell. When I found out that the voucher money was going to religious ed, I got furious. I then read our Constitution for the state, and it's against the Constitution. I contacted the lawyer at FFRF, Freedom from Religion Foundation, who tries to keep religion out of our government. And the lawyer there wrote to me saying the Supreme Court had passed a law it's saying it is all right that public money earmarked for schools go to private religious schools. And that was based on one woman, a single mother who had a child somewhere in a little town in Colorado. And the public school was not able to help service that child with a severe disability. The only one within a reasonable distance from her home happened to be a Catholic school. And so the Supreme Court made their decision based on that circumstance, and it applies to the whole country. You mean for federal, or you mean for federal programs? You're talking about federal? We're talking about public school money. So that federal and all the states.
Yeah, it's a big issue. I mean, I think we can all agree the Supreme Court is making some decisions right now that really on their face do not seem very legal. I'm not a lawyer, but, and to your other question about the Free State Project, there's less of them than they would have you think, but they are very effective. And the reason that they're effective, frankly, is because in some of these towns, they can't find anyone to run against them because the reps don't get paid. And this is an issue I campaigned a lot about on last cycle, and I haven't talked about it as much this time because it's a little bit more nuanced, but the fact is, because New Hampshire's the only state that doesn't pay our reps, they came here knowing that, Libertarian Steve could sleep on his mom's couch, he didn't need to have any money, he could go to New Hampshire and he could represent some community that could not find anyone to run against him. So that part of our system is, frankly, it's going to be hard to fix, but we really need to, because it allows these radicals to come in and push their radical agenda for very little money. And the amount of money that these other libertarian groups are putting into this state, millions of dollars to get these state reps elected. We need to talk more about these systemic issues in New Hampshire that really hold Democrats back, because it's very easy for the Republicans to find rich people that can run, and it's really easy for them to find these libertarians that are willing to literally, like I said, sleep on their mom's couch or whatever to do it. It's harder for us because we're working and not, as obsessed with this cause as the Free State Project is. But the best thing that we can do is just let people know that they're here, because the average person on the street, frankly, has no idea, and that's probably the most terrifying thing. And this is why we are all in some ways becoming citizen journalists, because local journalism in our state and across the country has been decimated. And so we've got to work to get these messages out, and it's going to happen in a coffee shop or at a knitting circle or wherever it's going to happen. But when I tell people, hey, there's these guys at Free State Project, they got this education voucher thing passed, it's taking money from your kids' public schools, my friends go, what? Like, what are you talking about? This is insane. I'm like, no, it's really happening in our state. So luckily, there's more media attention. There's been more stuff coming to light. I'm hoping more people will wake up, but it's just really important for us to keep spreading the message and keep people aware.
All the states around us have a much higher minimum wage. Do you support New Hampshire getting a higher minimum wage?
Definitely, 100%. I think that one of the mistakes that the Democrats have made over the last, let's say since Sununu took over, with the minimum wage is that they're afraid to go for a number lower than, it was 15 for a little while, now they've moved it up to 17. And the problem is, as long as the Senate and the House are gerrymandered to the point that they're gerrymandered, we got to be a little bit more realistic. So what I would recommend, if I was writing the legislation today, is go for 10 this year, go for 12 the next year, go to 14, go to 16. Try to get these incremental gains. I'm not always a fan of incremental change, but in this one where we've been stuck on 725 forever, it would make sense to just get to 10 and then try to work your way up from there. And frankly, for the business community, I think that they would be more receptive to a slower increase as opposed to a more drastic one. That said, when they did the $20 minimum wage in California, the net effect at this point is, there was not mass layoffs as was threatened by the business community. So, the businesses can stand the increase. It's just a matter of what we can get through a very gerrymandered Senate. And I think it's really important for people to understand how gerrymandered our Senate is, and we have to sort of be realistic until we get to 2030. This is when we have an opportunity to fix the districts. So, in my opinion, what we should do is sort of tiptoe around some of these issues in a way until we get to 2030. Don't spook the independents, right? I'm not going to run on an income tax or a sales tax, even though I'm also not going to take the pledge. But I'm not going to run an income tax or a sales tax because I want to win. That's not to say that at some point down the line, maybe second or third term, we will begin to talk about an income tax or a sales tax or another source of revenue. But I think doing that out of the gate might be detrimental to my long-term plans, or our long-term plans, if you will. So I think there's some things that we have to just be delicate with until we can get these districts ungerrymandered, and then, in many ways, there will be a lot more opportunity for the kind of legislation that we want.
Would you be thinking about bringing back the dividend tax then and raising corporate and business taxes to fund the work?
Yes. What I found is, especially the interest in dividends tax. So it's funny. I use social media like a focus group. I'll put out an idea, and I'll see what the comments are, and I'll see conservative, Republican, Democrat, everyone will kind of chime in. And there was this one guy kept putting up these different tax ideas, and he said it straight up. He's like, I'm a conservative Republican or conservative independent, and he said, oh, this idea is bad, this idea is bad, this idea is bad. When I brought up interest and dividends, he said, no, that's a good tax. We should bring it back, 187 million a year. And I've heard this from other people too. And frankly, I think people love a tax that doesn't affect them. Fair enough, but that was a tax that was generally hitting people over $250,000 a year. I actually talked to Maggie Hassan about it the other day, and she had suggested there were some tweaks we could make to ensure that lower income people that were retired wouldn't get hit by that, which I think was a problem that was brought up when they were getting rid of it, but I don't think it was a lot of people. But there were some changes we could make, and maybe we rebrand it in a way. But frankly, that itself is a wealth tax, and that's what we want to be moving to, is taxing wealth and not work.
Right.
Thank you.
So your first element is housing costs.
Sorry, what was the first part? The first?
Housing. Cost of housing.
So this is what's really important for people to understand, is the reason that housing costs have gotten so high, or one of the reasons, there's a number of reasons. One of the reasons is because planning and zoning boards did not want to permit large swaths of family-friendly neighborhoods, because rightly it would drive up their property taxes. So this is where property taxes, education, and housing are all co-mingled. They're all one issue. Because even now, commuters are saying, hey, do we want to build all these houses? What's this going to do to our school budget? So they're all connected. But that said, it's not a silver bullet to just lower property taxes. We also are going to need to do some state investment. And frankly, I think that more money needs to be going to the New Hampshire Housing Authority. They've done some really great work, especially in Portsmouth. It's actually, I can't remember his name, but it's probably soon to be CD1 candidate Shaheen's husband. But anyway, they have done great work there, rehabbing a bunch of old buildings that some that the city owned, some that they were able to acquire, and they've housed like 1,000 people. Like, they did a really good job. And frankly, it's a good program. We're going to need some help at the bottom, because the problem is we have not let the free market function in the housing market for decades. And so we're going to need to do some work there on the state funding. And right now, the housing, they're getting very little money for the affordable housing agency. It's just really underfunded in our state.
Another thing would be zoning. There are so many people in New Hampshire that have a garage that could be turned into a little apartment or something of it, and the town, it has to be connected to your house. Well, that's the most ridiculous thing ever. Yeah. And because of these stupid zoning things, prevent people from being able to renovate and offer affordable housing to young people in their community.
100%. So I was on the Newmarket, the first board I was on was the Newmarket CBA. And it was really funny because the very first meeting I went to was a guy who wanted to put an apartment in his dad's barn because his dad was getting old. He said he's got, Alzheimer's, I want to take care of him. And it was really funny because me and another guy, it was my first day, and I was like, oh, surely we should let this guy do it. And we voted yes, the other three voted no, and he wasn't allowed. And I thought it was simply an error in the way that the zoning code was written, that they didn't realize that it didn't allow unattached ADUs, accessory dwelling units. How naive was I to realize that no, this was intentional because they had this fear that it would lead to massive development all over town. It took me about 5 years. From that point, I kept asking the town council and asking the town council and asking the planning board. I got on the town council, and then from that perspective, kept asking, hey, when are we going to deal with this ADU thing? It happened literally, I got it through like in the last month that I was on the council, and then they voted in after I left. But we were able to now build unattached ADUs. The problem is, the vice chair of the planning board came to me after and she said, this took us so long to get it through that I just went to build a tiny home in my backyard. It's going to be $200,000. So the problem is we put this off for so long that the cost of building is going through the roof, and not to mention Trump's tariffs on importing wood and steel and all this stuff is making the whole issue 10 times worse. So the issues with, is that thing?
I don't know, maybe understand.
So the issues with housing it's not going away tomorrow, and we're going to need a lot of different solutions. There might be tiny homes here, it might be townhouses somewhere else, it might be more housing, family-friendly housing somewhere else. Yeah.
One of the problems is that people are building these
Yeah.
not in any way taxed in any fashion. And you know, those would be apartments or places that people could live, but you make more money
Yeah.
in an Airbnb.
I 100% agree. I mean, I will say Airbnb, I don't know about New Hampshire, but in some other parts of the country is having a bit of a moment right now, and people are really struggling to actually find renters for their Airbnbs. So that could turn around quickly if the market, changes, but I think we do need to put a limit on Airbnbs. I talked to someone who lived in the North Country, and it was kind of funny because she was telling me that on the one side, she was struggling to find an apartment because of all the Airbnbs. On the other side, she was running a cleaning company, cleaning Airbnbs.
Yeah.
So you don't want to eliminate them, but there needs to be some kind of a cap, and there is a reason why we inspect hotels. My dad got an Airbnb at Lake Winnipesaukee a couple summers ago, and he's not here so I can say this, my dad's pretty cheap, right? And so he probably got the cheapest house that you could get an Airbnb within, walking distance of Lake Winnipesaukee, and it was a death trap. Like, broken holes in the deck, electric wires hanging out, we got all the babies, my nieces and nephews running around, and me and my sisters and my brother are looking at each other like, what did Dad bring? Where did he find this place? But it got me thinking, I'm like, a hotel gets inspected for a reason. And these places probably should be under some sort of, regulations. And we need to limit them for sure.
And how do you plan to work with members of the opposite party to achieve the goal? With so much infighting in the House, the Democrats, the Republicans,
It's a really good question. And obviously this depends on how the numbers work out, with the Senate and with the House. But while it's gerrymandered, it's going to be very hard to get around that. I have found it's pretty easy not easy, but you can find common ground with Republicans. And the common ground that we work on is, for instance, things like cannabis legalization. They want to get that done. I do too. That will bring in revenue. They want to get, the libertarians are pro zoning reforms. They want to do these zoning reforms for not the reasons we want, but because they just want less laws in general. So work with the libertarians when it's on zoning laws. Don't work with them when it's on destroying public education. But the reality is, we have to maybe work with some people that we disagree with. And one thing that I learned from running a restaurant is how to talk to all sorts of types of people. And it's just essential. I have had to sit in my restaurant late into the night, listening to some Trumper, blabber on about his latest conspiracy theory about the Democrats. And I've sat there and I've just listened because that's my job. But I now understand these people, I think, in a way that I would not have 10 years ago. And frankly, many Republicans in our state are worried about the same things that we are. And the radicals in the state house, I actually do not think are a reflection of the average Democrat or average Republican that we can win back. And I think that once more of these things, such as the Free State Project and the vouchers comes to light, and I think just looking at the we are in a fiscal hole. We should not tiptoe around this issue. The fiscal situation in this state is not great. There is a reason why I'm the only one running for governor, because nobody wants to deal with this problem, okay? And so I think the average Republican is starting to realize, like, hey, my property taxes aren't just high because of my local budget committee. That's the line I get from a lot of the state reps, the Republicans. They'll say, oh, if your property taxes are high, it's your budget committee, it's your town council, it's blowing money on, too much admin at the school. And I thought that too before I looked at the budget myself on the town council. I said, geez, we're actually running every department on a shoestring, and I think anyone that gets involved goes, hey, like in most towns in New Hampshire goes, hey, this is not sustainable, what we're doing. And this is really the conversation that I'm trying to get started, is there's a certain amount of money you need to run a state. We don't have that much money. And what happens when you don't have that much money is you end up getting sued. Like, we are going to have to pay $500 million because of the YDC abuse that happened over the course of decades. And we're getting to a point where it makes no sense to be pound wise and penny foolish. Penny wise and pound foolish. Did I say that wrong? And that's how the Republicans have been running the state, is kicking the can down the road, and now we are going to have to do it. And I hate to say this, but this is what happens a lot. Republicans make problems, Democrats fix them. By the time they get fixed, Republicans take credit for them. So We will hopefully be around long enough to take credit for fixing the economy and fixing this state, but we've got to be realistic that we are in a fiscal hole, frankly, a doom loop, I like to call it. Because what are they doing to pay for the YDC abuse case? They're cutting funding to DHHS, which oversees YDC. So what's only going to almost guarantee to happen? More lawsuits. You know, so you just can't run a state like this. It's ridiculous. It's not fiscally conservative, and that's what we need to start telling the average Republican. Like, giving $50 million to private schools is not fiscal conservative. You know, and whatever you thought the Republican Party was, it's not that anymore. And we got to wake these people up and say, hey, look at the state, like, look what's going on, and understand that this is unsustainable. Thank you.
You mentioned you have a 9-year-old son. In a misogynistic society, how are you raising him to respect women?
Good question. You know, the toxic masculinity, I don't want to turn this into a TED Talk, but is as bad for men as it is for women. I think that's really important for people to understand, is that particularly when you're a man and maybe you don't have a college education and you cannot provide for your family, it's very hard. And what ends up happening is you have these men who are under the age of, let's say, 27, who are stuck in their parents' basement. They see no future for themselves. They say, hey, I can go out and get a job, get paid $20 an hour, but I need $100 an hour to buy a house. How am I ever going to start a family? How am I ever going to get out of here? I'm not. And they literally give up. I mean, I know these people have just given up. They're just happy that they're going to, and the parents are like, I don't know what to do. Timmy's in his room playing video games all the time. So it's really important for us, first of all, with children and with my son, is to watch what they are watching, particularly on YouTube and social media, because right now, and I talked about this in my last campaign, and my campaign manager thought it was crazy, but this sort of YouTube to Alex Jones to white supremacy type pipeline, and how we need to realize that these things didn't happen in a vacuum. They happened because these young men feel like there is no future for them, and they see someone like Donald Trump or Andrew Tate or some of these other people saying, hey, you know, the left said you're racist. Well, we're racist. Come be with us. Come be racist with us. You know, and you can see this from the Republican text messages. You know, Donald Trump has basically made this space where it's safe to be racist, and these kids feel like it's, you know, a cool thing to do or whatever it is. It gives them purpose. And what Donald Trump is selling is a solution to inequality, which is his solution is snake oil. He says blame Mexicans, blame immigrants. You know, that's not the problem. It's the billionaire class that is screwing the average young person. It's not immigrants. So I think it's just really important that we watch our sons and then we give them good examples. My son, actually, it's really funny because he has been around enough of my speeches and heard me practicing speeches for literally years now, that recently he started a protest about the maple syrup at the elementary school. And he said, this maple syrup is garbage, we need better maple syrup. And allegedly, they got better maple syrup. So I think I'm doing all right, but we gotta just watch our kids. Sure.
It is very important because of my ethnic group. How would you deal with the federal government, with Plymouth, and with the stormtroopers I call the ICE, if they're getting these state messages? How do you have to?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's wild right now. We're in a very strange and dangerous place with ICE because they're not the military. They have not taken an oath in the same way that the military has, and frankly, they are now, I think, the highest funded police organization potentially in the world. I think there's some really basic things that we can do in the state of New Hampshire, such as I'm fairly certain that we could pass a law based on our Constitution that you cannot have mass law enforcement because they need to be accountable, and you can't hold someone accountable if they have their face covered.
The reason also I asked that question, I have to carry my passport, you don't.
Yeah,
And so that's scary.
yeah,
In my 18 years within the United States, I was born in the United States. I've seen bad things happen in the United States, but I've never seen this bad.
yeah.
All I can think of, and it's no offense to that, the Holocaust. Of course, I cannot compare myself to that, but it seems to me also my father was a World War II veteran. democracy.
Yeah.
In the United States, D-Day. He came back 18, 19 years old, I was born. And so we've been here for so many years. I'm Mexican American, so I still have an accent as a people. But still, that really bothers me.
Yeah.
It's happening nowadays. It's so scary.
Yeah.
Scary.
My bigger goal with becoming governor of New Hampshire, in terms of Trump and MAGA and all of this, frankly, fascism, the authoritarianism, is my hope is that when New Hampshire goes blue, the Northeast will be blue. And I think at that point, we can do some things that we cannot do right now. I think we could do things like push ICE out. I think we could do things like be a safe zone, if you will, for people that are potentially fleeing other parts of the country. And you know, these are big ideas, but we're getting into really uncharted and dangerous territory. And I think it helps to think about New Hampshire and think about us as a state and focus our energies here. I try not to worry about the whole country because it's so big and there's a lot of things going on. I can worry about New Hampshire and I can focus on New England. But if we keep New England and New Hampshire free, then we will be good. And I will tell you, our state and our area is the birthplace of democracy. And it will be where democracy lives on. And we will fight whatever comes. And I want to just assure you that I will do everything in my power to defend the people who live in New Hampshire. Thank you.
Where do you stand on the environment?
Love it. I honestly, if we lived in a perfect world, I would run on climate change, microplastics, and PFOAs. That would be my entire campaign, because those are the three things that keep me up at night. I mean, there's other things that I worry about in the shorter term, but frankly, microplastics particularly, I think are a big threat to our long-term species survival. So the problem is, again, environmental issues don't pull as well as some of these other things, but I think it's really important that we start thinking about how we're going to hold the corporations accountable for the pollution they brought into our state. I think that's a really good way to look at it. Like when I see these water treatment plants saying, oh, we have to put in these PFAS filters and it's going to cost us tens of millions of dollars. I'm like, wait, why isn't 3M paying for that? That's 3M's, they made billions of dollars off of making PFOAs and those plastics. And so we need to hold them accountable. Same with global warming. I mean, the fossil fuel industry has known since the 70s, if not earlier, that what they were doing was going to cause this to happen. And the fact that we are not holding them financially accountable makes no sense, especially when states around us are already doing that.
I have two questions. So we are currently in the sixth mass extinction. You know that, right? So we're losing our bees, our native bees, and our pollinators. Where do you stand on that? Because in this state, the rusty patched bumblebees believed to be locally extinct. So we're losing more and more instincts. So where do you stand in the use of pesticides? And would you come out against pesticides? That's one.
Genetically modified corn.
And genetically modified corn, using all that, because that can kill tons of bees. And so then second, a whole nother question, would you support making Indigenous Peoples' Day in replace of Columbus Day?
Yeah. Yes, I would support the Indigenous Peoples' Day for sure. In terms of glyphosate, yes, we need to tackle this issue of how we grow food in general in our country. I think that is actually the one good thing that RFK Jr. has brought into the conversation is just this idea that how is our food being grown and are we maximizing yields in the short term for long-term damage? And it's a thing I think about a lot. My girlfriend is a farmer, amateur, off and on, and so she actually looked this up. Apparently at the governor's mansion there is a pollinator garden.
Right, but they didn't come out, like when we had bills, because I've worked on bills on this one before, it didn't go the way we had hoped. So I'm asking you, would you support getting rid of pesticides?
Yes,
To
yeah.
protect pollinators?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think we really...
People. Our food system, because that affects our food system, but it also affects our biodiversity.
Yeah.
Because the chemicals get in our water system, our air, and so
I've seen some farmers, even in the Midwest, that are starting to wake up to the dangers of pesticides, and they're looking into these new farming techniques. And I think that, I've worked with a lot of farmers in New Hampshire. I've got a lot of friends that are farmers, and frankly, they're generally sort of organic farmers, so they're not using the pesticides here necessarily as much as they're using them in other places. But obviously, our golf courses are using a lot of pesticides, and we got to look at the downstream effects of these chemicals. We've got big golf courses right on the Great Bay near where I live, and it's done some harm to the local ecosystem. And I think we just need to look at these costs as being, who's paying for it. Like they might have a green lawn today, and then the groundskeeper has cancer in 10 years. We can't have that. So I think it's making sure that people are educated and understand why these things are such a threat, and why we need to get rid of them.
I understand that Maine and Vermont does not allow plastic bags. How soon are we not going to?
So it's kind of funny because there has been some studies showing that removing plastic bags actually can increase the amount of plastic, believe it or not, because people forget their bags when they go to the grocery store and then they buy a new one every time. And the bag that you buy, the reusable one, is equal to maybe 20 or 30 plastic bags. But I hear your point. I think getting microplastics and
Single-use plastic.
yeah, out of the stream is really important, and holding the corporations that make it accountable.
Well, if they wouldn't be allowed to buy plastic bags, if they would have to buy cloth bags.
In Alaska, there are no single-use plastic bags. You can't buy one if you forgot your reusable one or whatever. You get a paper bag and they charge you 50 cents for it.
Yeah, that's the way to do it.
There's no individual plastic bottles at all. You get it in a cardboard box just like we used to get our milk.
Yeah.
And there's no
Yeah.
plastic straws.
Well, that's the way to do it. I
All
mean,
three,
I think
done and gone in Alaska.
the best solutions to problems I find are ones that other states are already doing. I didn't know that about Alaska, and I think that's really where, this was the intention of the United States, to have each state be the incubator of democracy and be trying different things. And we should learn from our neighbors and implement what's working and not implement what doesn't.
Well, we tried to push all three of those bills through the Senate more than once in New Hampshire, and every single one of them failed.
Yeah.
You're done when the guys with the hat shake cases walk in the room. It's like every single time.
Any other questions?
Energy policy. I mean, one of the things that cuts across all economic districts and economic levels is energy poverty, cost of energy. Could you articulate your position on energy?
Yeah, I mean, we need more. Let's be honest. I think that, it was a real obvious mistake when Trump was stopping the wind and energy off of the coast. And we're going to need more wind energy. I think one benefit of Trump deploying the National Guard that I thought of the other day is that it opens up a use of the National Guard that I think he would not use, but I would be in favor of, which is installing solar panels in every state-owned and municipal-owned building in New Hampshire. There's a lot of roofs out there, and a lot of them have solar panels on them, and we've got National Guard troops, and I think that would be an investment worthwhile. That said, my dad was a nuclear engineer in Seabrook for 30 years, so I'm pro-nuclear. There's a lot of technologies coming out with these small nuclear reactors. We'll see how that pans out, but it's gonna be the topic of the next 10 years because all of this AI needs a ton of energy. And so we are really gonna have to, think about that and figure out how we're gonna get all this power.
I have both solar and the heat pump, and I paid $2 for my electricity last night.
So I'm being told I only have one last question. Is there anybody else that's haven't?
How are you going against Kelly?
Sorry, say it again. How
are you going to run against Kelly?
So the thing that I don't think probably a lot of Democrats know that I know from talking to Republicans in my restaurant is that they don't love Kelly. It was not the love affair they had with Sununu. In fact, they told me, I had a number of people tell me, they said they were voting for Kamala. This was independent voters. They said, I'm voting for Kamala, but I'm voting for Kelly because I just do not like Joyce Craig. I just do not, it was like a protest vote, in fact. Because they said, Joyce Craig, I mean, it's obviously crazy. Joyce Craig is going to just spread homeless people around the whole state or something. But this is what people would tell me.
Talk to me like I'm a Republican.
Yeah.
Tell me why I should vote for you.
So Kelly Ayotte is, and I think this is what people are telling me, is the Republicans look at her as part of the swamp. You know, the Blackstone, the lobbying, and she's not in there to really solve any major problems in terms of housing, education, property taxes. She's in there for one reason, and it's to get her name back in the headlines. She's going to kick the can down the road for another 2 years, and then she's going to run for Senate in 2028. That's why she's there. That's it. I don't really think she cares anything else about the state of New Hampshire except a stepping stone to get back in the Senate. And I think that it's going to be very clear by September of 2026 when her ties to Donald Trump and the state of the economy is going to be impossible for her to escape from. And she's been very smart about the votes that she's vetoed, the bills she's vetoed. She's done some things that I was very surprised about. When they pulled that 6-week abortion ban, when it first got proposed and I started talking about it, I was like, oh, that's it. She's out. Because she's going to either veto it or she won't, and she's going to make people mad either way. And she got them to pull it. And I was like, okay, she knows what she's doing. But that said, I think, in my opinion, is the economy, all the indicators I'm reading, the economy by September 26th is going to be so bad. I think people are going to be fleeing the Republican brand. It's going to be toxic. They're going to be saying the Republicans cannot be trusted on economic issues. And we have to be ready with our own message. It can't just be Republican bad. It's got to be, here's a new thing we're going to do. Here's we're going to help you. Housing, property tax, and education. Community first economics. Thank you guys.